Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 37 of the Hammer Territory podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on the evening of June 30th. It is basically July, and I'm joined on today's podcast, as I always am, by Scott Coleman. Scott, we're halfway home at this point in time. There's been a lot of baseball, and there's a lot more baseball to come.
Hey, Brad, that is right. We are at the midway point, and I don't know. It has been a conflicting first half, is probably how I would, if somebody were to say, what do you think of the season so far, Scott? It's conflicting. Overall, they're playing pretty well. We have some numbers here. We're going to break down where they've been this year compared to prior years. But there have also been just so many crushing injuries and the frustrations with the offense. But at the end of the day, they're still winning more games than not, and they're comfortably in the playoffs. So I guess it's too hard to be too upset right now.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that framing. They're on pace for fewer wins than they usually are at this point in time, and we'll get into more of what that is and sort of the big picture. But I think that's right. They're obviously projected comfortably as a playoff team right now, which is not where anybody wanted to be necessarily. I think the division being where it is has colored some of the perceptions, and obviously that pretty long swoon they had did not give everybody the greatest vibes in the world. But still, big picture, it's been a pretty solid enough opening to the year. We should say at the top of the podcast, I know we have some new listeners. I'm sure we always do. We are, of course, at the end of June and heading into July, but this is our first season as part of the Foul Territory network of podcasts, and we hope that you will stick around and check it out, the entire podcast network at Foul Territory, including the flagship show at Foul Territory, in addition to Dodgers Territory, Northside Territory, etc. Please subscribe to this podcast anywhere you find podcasts, especially places like Apple and Spotify, Overcast, etc. Please leave 5-star ratings and reviews, and crucially, tell your friends about the pod. Also, an organic plug here for my guy Scott Coleman, my co-host on this podcast. You did honestly what was a great interview. I told you that offline, so I could say it online as well. A great interview on Friday with Brandon Gaudin, the television voice of the Braves. Lots of interesting stuff on that. I definitely recommend people listen to that because while it's a couple of days old now, I know he called the game this morning. Yes, this morning on Roku. But Brandon was awesome in that interview. He did a great job as well.
Well, thank you for that. And, I'll say this, Brandon is as genuine as he comes off on television, really a good guy. I had never talked to him other than a couple of messages on Twitter, but just a really good dude. The Braves are in great hands with him in the booth, and a fun interview. He's just a natural. Obviously, he talks for a living, but some of the stories he has and his deep connections to the Braves, he is very much a Braves fan first and foremost. And when he says he is living the dream, getting to call the Braves every single night, he means it. I think he's one of the best in the game, and really would encourage folks, if you missed it was kind of an uncommon time slot on Friday. We did it. It was like a mid-Friday drop in kind of a surprise fashion. So if you did miss it, be sure to check that out. Brandon had a lot of good insight as well into the team.
Listen, when you can get Brandon Gaudin on the show, you do it whenever he asks you to. Whenever he possibly can, we do it. So if it had been midnight on Saturday, we would have done it. And I do appreciate you doing that, Scott, and folks should definitely listen to that for sure. With that out of the way, also we did our normal shows last week. Great stuff from Steven and Sean, et cetera, et cetera. We won't cover a ton of early in the week performance for the Braves on this podcast. They did win the weekend series against the Pirates. We'll talk about that more in a second. We sort of talked around it already, but the Braves have now played 82 games exactly, which is one more than half of the schedule. I know there's always the thing I make fun of each and every year about the first half, second half splits about the All-Star break, whereas the first half is actually now, which basically includes another week and a half or so until the All-Star break. But alas, here we are. A good time to kind of talk about where they are. And you actually saw something on Twitter that I want you to lead off with here because it was very instructive about kind of the recent history during this Braves divisional title run. And it's still ongoing until it's broken, about how they performed in the first 81 games the last few years.
Yeah, I thought a little perspective going back to 2018 would be beneficial. And our good pal, Braves America on Twitter, who his first name is Dayton, a great follow, had some really good numbers. So these are the number of wins the Braves have had at the halfway point dating back to 2018 and the start of the division run. This year, 46 wins. Last year, 54, which, spoiler, is significantly higher than all the rest. So again, 46 wins this year, 54 last, but then 47 in 2022, only 40 in 2021. And spoiler alert, Brad, they went on to win the World Series that year.
Did they? I don't
Uh,
remember that. I blacked
I
out. That's my
remember
fault.
it well.
Yeah.
We did a lot of podcasts. You might have remembered doing like 40 podcasts in a month. It was pretty crazy. Um, 2020, of course, the shortened season, they had 18 wins at the midway point, which equates out to about 48 over the course if they were playing a full season. 48 wins again in 2019 and 47 in 2018. That is, of course, a lot of numbers. The easy math is over the last 7 years, the Braves have averaged 47.1 wins come midway point, and they're at 46 this season. They're pretty close to what they've been averaging. Of course, the very obvious difference this year is that the Phillies are really good. And for the first time in a while, the Braves are significantly back as we hit the midway point.
Right. And that is part of this. Of course, folks will remember that the Braves did chase the Mets down not too long ago in a divisional race that was memorable, and they had even a bigger deficit than this in that race, which you can't always just big on that happening, I will say. It's obviously the division is far from over. The Braves could get really hot. The Phillies could cool off. But I think it is fair to say, as we've said before on this podcast, that the Phillies are the clear favorite to win the National League East and break the Braves' run of consecutive titles in the division. Again, favorite, not lock by any means. But the Braves are still in a good spot for the division. As we're talking right now, at the end of Sunday's slate, the Braves are 8 back of the Phillies. Uphill battle there, but they're also 3 games ahead of the entire wild card field right now, and another couple more games beyond that about from missing the playoffs. So if the Braves just do what they did in the first half, let's just say mind-numbing or maddening, whatever word you want to use, as this first half has been in some respects, if the Braves simply replicate the first half, they will be in the playoffs. I feel absolutely 100% confident about that.
Well, and it helps that the rest of the National League is very pedestrian outside of the top four. I think there's a clear top four, and then both St. Louis and San Diego have turned it on in recent weeks. And there's a little bit of a gap forming in the wild card race with those 3 clubs. But at the end of the day, man, it's if the Phillies weren't doing great, I think we'd be in a much better mindset and headspace. But the Phillies are a really good team. And 8 games back with 80 games to go, not impossible. The Braves still have 9 or 10 games head to head against Philadelphia, including this upcoming weekend at Truist, which is going to be a very important series for the Braves as we near the All-Star break. But I think it is becoming more and more apparent every single year with the expanded playoffs. It really does not matter what your seed is, what your home field is, how you're playing going into the playoffs. It is so random. Get into the dance and try to get hot for a month. And at the end of the day, I mean, there's no greater example than the Diamondbacks and the Rangers getting in last year. The Diamondbacks had a negative run differential and played horribly in September. They sneak in, they get to the World Series, and the Rangers were really good early, then were awful for about 2 months, figured some things out in September, and then went on to win it all, of course. Those teams are a combined 9 games below 500 this season. If you need any more evidence, that is truly, I know people don't love it, but if you need any more evidence,
I don't love it.
it is for better or worse. The playoffs are very much a crapshoot. That is baseball, kind of is what it is. And sure, I would love for the Braves to be the 1 seed and win the East for 8th year in a row, 7th year in a row. But we will see what the next few months hold.
Yeah, I'm going to try my best. I'm trying to sort of censor right now about my rant about the expanded playoffs, Scott. I know you feel it coming through the screen. I'm feeling it, but I'm not going to do it right now. Let's just say if you're a new listener, I don't like the expanded playoffs. But alas, your point is a great one there. And if you want a example close to home, we've said this many times, but there was no metric you could use to say that the Braves in 2021 was their best team of this run. In fact, it was probably one of their worst teams of this run, and that's the one that won the World Series. So there's a nice little internal example of how this is supposed to work as well at this point in time. So we'll leave it there. That's sort of a good check-in at the almost exact midway point. I guess we could have done a show late last night. We decided not to do that, but here we are on Sunday evening, 82 games in, and that's where the Braves are after the first half, the actual first half of the season. All right, we'll have some talk about this weekend's performances from the Braves, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, but first, a word from our partners on today's podcast. Okay, Scott, let us dive into the weekend. A couple of wins on Friday and Saturday, much more upbeat than the loss on Sunday. Friday's game, you know where I'm going first, but we can hold off if you want to. It was a 6-1 victory for the Braves to start things off in a positive fashion. I guess the team, of course, that they are pretty solidly better than in Pittsburgh.
I was going to say, Brad, you usually steer the boat on these, but I think on Friday, let me ask you, who pitched on Friday night?
A couple of old guys, especially one in particular old guy who started the game. His name is Charlie Morton.
Do you like Charlie Morton?
I am known to have some level of affection for Charlie Morton, at least more than the average consumer of Braves baseball.
Why don't you tell everyone how Charlie pitched on
Wow,
Friday?
what a hosting job by Scott Coleman right there. No, Chuck was awesome on Friday. You know, great on a curve on some level facing the Pirates. I'll grant you that. But 6 and a third innings, 3 hits, no runs, 1 walk, 7 strikeouts. It was the good Charlie. I don't believe that he paid off your usual game on Friday night, Scott. That did not happen. I believe
There
as
was
far
a
as the
lot of
curveball.
controversy, actually, Brad.
Go ahead.
A lot of controversy. A first inning hit by pitch from Charlie, but it was a fastball.
It
And
has to be a
after
curveball, folks. That's part of the game.
it was extensive, I had a lot of folks reach out to me. Thank you. Shout out to you all. You are the real ones. After official review, it had to be a curveball based on the letter of the law. So we did not have a winner on Friday night. No back foot curves for Charlie. But no, I mean, in all seriousness, we're joking around. Charlie was very good on Friday night. He had his command back, which is something that had escaped him in recent starts. Only 1 walk, no runs, 7 strikeouts. It was probably the best Charlie has looked in some time and really encouraging for him. Let's hope this kind of gets him on the right path. He talked at length with Ken Rosenthal last weekend about how frustrated he was and he just hadn't been able to find any kind of consistency on the mound. Let's hope this is just kind of a not a wake up call, but just a big step in the right direction for Charlie.
Yeah, I'm glad you plugged that, and that was really good insight from Charlie through the lens of our I guess our teammate Ken Rosenthal over at Foul Territory. But yeah, it's definitely been Jekyll and Hyde. Even as the Charlie advocate, I would admit that it's not always been pretty this year. But I will say he's had 15 starts this year. He has allowed 2 runs or fewer in 9 of those 15 starts. Pretty good, I gotta say. That's kind of what you would ask for from Charlie through the first half of the season, as we've already laid out earlier. He's on pace for about 170 innings with an ERA that begins with a 3. And if that's all you knew, Scott, you would be pretty excited about that. I know we always try
Oh
to
yeah.
talk about what Charlie is, but an ERA is not everything. I'll be the first to say that, but his peripherals look fine too. Like he's just pitching like a very solid mid rotation guy. Not the guy he was 3 years ago, but certainly someone that has been pitching pretty well.
He has. And another cool nugget from Friday night. So Charlie goes 6 and a third, leaves in the seventh inning for Jesse Chavez. And first of all, Jesse Chavez has a 1.32 ERA, which I mean defies every bit of logic. It is unbelievable watching him do what he does. And secondly, I can only imagine in the history of baseball how many times a 40-year-old starting pitcher has given way to a 40-year-old reliever. Really cool to see those guys both doing it at a high level and just a testament to their work ethic and just honestly their bodies holding up into their 40s is just something so few players have a chance to do.
That's right. I have a quiz for you while we're here. This is not fair to you whatsoever, but you do have a 50% chance of getting it right. Do you know who's older between Charlie and Jesse?
I believe Jesse is.
That is correct. By
Boom.
about 3 months. They are the same numerical age, but Jesse was born in August, Charlie in November. But yeah, that's a pretty crazy back to back there. And I'm not sure if you've been privy to this, Scott, as someone who does not live in the city of Atlanta. There is a movement of sorts to get Jesse elected to the All Star game. And by elected, I mean as a pitcher, you don't get to vote. If there was fan voting, I think he actually might get in. Honestly,
Yeah. Oh, you know the Braves fans would stuff the ballots for Jesse.
they would.
It would be very, very cool for him to go. He is kind of the complete opposite of who generally gets into the All-Star game. Not a closer, obviously not a starter. But I think Jesse's story is so known at this point. Maybe Major League Baseball get him in there. There are always a couple of pitchers who pull out because of injury or because they pitched the day before, won't have a chance to appear. So it is not impossible. And I would hope that the Braves are campaigning with the league to get Jesse there because that would just be such a cool story.
And we've all talked about it ad nauseum, but while we're here, Jesse Chavez has a career ERA of about 4.2, which is no, it's totally fine. His career ERA with the Braves is 2.77. And it's actually in the ones the last 2 years combined. I think if you go the last 3 years combined in Atlanta, it's still maybe in the ones. It's certainly not far above 2. So he has been ludicrously good. And yeah, there's probably a little bit of luck involved, but hey, It's whatever's working for you, Jesse. Just keep it rolling, please.
Yeah. Well, and the beauty is Jesse Chavez is not having to throw super high leverage innings for
No.
this bullpen. He is probably option number 7 in the group right now. And that's where Jesse Chavez should be. He's just such a likable guy. I know he is beloved by his teammates and in the clubhouse. Really cool. And one last note on Charlie Morton here before we talk about the offense a little bit. Charlie Morton beat the Pirates on Friday night, which means he has now wins over all 30 major league teams. Pittsburgh, who he was with for years, of course, actually after the Braves trade. Charlie had never beaten Pittsburgh, but he beat them on Friday, which means he is one of 4 active pitchers in baseball. I have one is Justin Verlander, one is Max Scherzer, and of course, I am going to forget the fourth. But nonetheless, a very, very cool club for Charlie to join.
Is it Kershaw or something? I don't know. I'm just
Oh, it's
guessing.
probably Kershaw.
I
Has to
have
be
no idea if
someone.
that's right. I'm totally guessing about like legendary pitchers. That was not a sourced guess by me, but
Yeah, Kershaw's a good guess. I'm sure there's someone obvious we're forgetting, but regardless, I mean, Max Scherzer, Justin Verlander, you talk about guys bound for Cooperstown one day. Yeah, really, really a tip of the cap to Charlie and a nice performance on Friday because it was not only a good pitching performance, but really the only game in the series where the bats were alive.
yeah, good way to point to that at this point. And Riley homers in the second inning. There was a big third inning as well. That was kind of the biggest inning of the weekend by a wide margin. I think with 5 runs in the third. They had 14 hits in the game on the way to 6 runs. Adam Duvall showed some life, as we'll get into in a second. Again with Saturday, everyone in the lineup other than Arcia had a hit in the game, and they got shut out on Thursday. If you wanted to be a little bit grim, as we might do later on in the show, you can look at the last 4 games and talk about how bad the offense has been. But Friday was the exception to the rule there on a comfortable win, and you can't have comfortable wins without good pitching, and that's the headliner. But the offense did more than enough to make it more comfortable in that game.
Yeah, really, throughout the whole game, the Braves did a good job of getting on base. 14 hits and walks combined as a team. A big bases clearing double from Marcell Ozuna, who has kind of quietly gone into a little bit of a slump for the first time all season.
Yeah.
And I mean, that is not a shot at Marcell, to be clear.
Oh
I
no,
mean,
not at all.
this guy has been unbelievable all year long, and inevitably he was going to cool down a little bit. I noticed that Pittsburgh in particular just peppered him with sliders and a lot of sliders off the plate. So inevitably, Marcell was going to cool down a bit. His numbers on the season are still fantastic. But, Friday night was a fun one. We knew there was going to be an excellent pitching matchup on Saturday. And then we knew the podcast curse was probably going to be alive and well on Sunday. But a nice win on Friday, to be sure, especially after a pretty disheartening and, I mean, let's just call it what it is, an awful loss to the White Sox on Thursday.
Yeah, that was covered in grave detail by Steven and Sean on the podcast. If you missed that one and want to relive it, go ahead and listen to that podcast. But as it bridged to Saturday, you mentioned Ozuna, who has been struggling recently, and he's earned one. It's fine. He's been awesome this year. He had 2 absolute rockets on Saturday. They were both double plays. I think over like 105 miles an hour on both of them. And they were. It's hard to have 2 double plays hit that hard in the same game. So it's not like he's not hitting the ball hard. Just that he had a little bit of bad luck over the weekend. But the headliner certainly on Saturday was the Fried versus Skeens matchup. It definitely was really good. I don't think that either of them were their absolute best in the game, which might sound crazy when it was it was 1-1 or 1-0 for a long time in the game. But what did you make of that? And we're not a Pirates podcast, but Skeens is pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, there was an at bat where he threw a 98 fastball on the outer corner and then a 92 splitter on the outer corner. And it's just like, what are you supposed to do when you're down 0-2? I mean, I forget who was in the box, but you could have told the hitter what was coming and he would have had no chance. He lived up to the billing. And, I thought Brandon Gaudin on the interview had a lot of really great things to say about Max Fried and a chance for him to pitch on a national stage. And he was equally as good. Maybe, as you said, maybe not his A1 self. Both the Pirates and the Braves had quite a few base runners. They just didn't do a whole lot with them. But Max did his job. Only 1 run over 6 innings, handed it over the bullpen. And thankfully, the Braves were able to come across in the 10th inning and win a Manfred ball game.
Yeah, I don't love those, but alas, that happened. And yeah, Max was really solid. I think we might have thought that it was going to be kind of easier when Jared Kelenic homered to lead off the game. And that was the only run against Skeens. Kelnick, as I think people probably know by now, has been really, really good for a while now. I pulled this number, I think, today. In the last calendar month, basically the month of June, I think he has an OPS of like 899, so 900 or so. And it's been even better than that since the mid-month injuries and all that stuff, the loss of Harris. I think he's even had like 1,000 OPS in the last couple of weeks. The breakout is here. You don't want to overstate it, I'll say, with Kelnick and like assuming this is going to be this forever. But the talent's always been there, and I know we talked about him a lot recently, but it's worth noting again. Home run on Saturday, and just the numbers have been fantastic for a while now.
And just the way that Kelnick has stepped up since not only Ronald went down, but since Michael Harris went down as well. You need players to step up when your superstars go down. And obviously, they're going to get Michael Harris back at some point. But man, they really needed one of the outfielders to start hitting without those two stars in center field and right field. Kelnick's been great. I love him in the leadoff spot. Even when Michael Harris comes back in a couple of weeks, I think Kelnick is going to stay in that leadoff spot. I've seen a couple of folks ask questions about it.
If he's doing this, man, if he's doing this, he's not leaving the spot. I'll tell you that right
yeah,
now.
Yeah. And even though he's fast, Michael Harris is not your prototypical leadoff hitter. The on base is not great. He doesn't walk a lot. He's not a high on base percentage guy. So yeah, I mean, I think Kelnick is, until something changes dramatically, and it may never change, to be honest. I think Kelnick is pretty locked into that top spot in the lineup.
Yeah, I would agree. Unless he cools off violently, he'll be sticking around there for quite some time. I thought it was actually a couple of interesting defensive or run prevention plays that we should note. There was this really nice catch by Duvall at the wall in the sixth. That was a nice moment, of course, before his walk-off hit, which is probably the headliner for Adams' night on Saturday. But the play that Darno and Hernandez made in the 10th, I'll let you describe it because I think you wrote down the description in our podcast. That was a big one, considering that there's no margin for error in extra innings.
Yeah, just a heads up play. If folks missed the game on Saturday, a wild pitch from Daysbel Hernandez got over the head of Travis d'Arnaud, but thankfully the ball bounced right back to Travis. He made a really nice quick flip to Daysbel, who very instinctively made it directly to the plate. I mean, there was no delay from that wild pitch being thrown to him breaking towards the plate, catches it, tags the runner on the helmet, and it was a big break for the Braves because the slide from whoever was running for Pittsburgh was just kind of an awkward one.
Yep.
The back of his cleat hit the ground first and caused his foot to bounce up. That's something that actually happened to a Braves runner a few years ago. I don't remember why I remember it so well. It was just kind of bad luck and something that happens in the heat of the moment. But replay review got it right, which was encouraging. It wasn't even a long replay either, Brad. It was like one of those 25-second, nope, overturned. So really a nice execution there from Daysbel, who has been really good in the bullpen. We're going to talk about a couple of injury updates, and Daysbel was actually optioned to Gwinnett on Sunday afternoon to make way for AJ Minter. But, he's been really good, and for the Braves to get out of the 10th with no runs scored and then give Adam Duvall a chance to have a nice moment the way he has been struggling lately, it was really a nice way to win on Saturday afternoon.
Strongly agree. We will leave it there for now. We'll talk about Sunday, which is, again, a little bit less exciting for the Braves in a second, but first, a word from our partners on the podcast. Okay, Scott, let's knock out Sunday's game, which was a 4-2 loss. Not the worst loss I've ever seen. To be optimistic, it wasn't as bad as Thursday, for example. But let's talk about Spencer Schwalbenbach for a second, because I think he's kind of made a believer out of some of us, including me, I think including you on some level. He was pretty darn good for a while on Sunday afternoon. I should say Sunday morning, I guess, especially for you out on the West Coast. But it got away from him a little bit, or maybe a lot of it, in the fifth inning. So what do you make of the entire experience there? Obviously, the numbers don't look fantastic overall, but it really is a closer look is like, hey, he's pretty good the first time through, second time through is okay, and then after that, it's kind of ugly.
Maybe I am on an island here. I don't think I am, but maybe I'm on an island, but I am very bullish on Spencer Schwalbenbach. And I mean, the stuff is really good. Up until the fifth inning unraveled, he was looking at 4 2/3 innings, only 3 hits, 1 walk, and 7 strikeouts. I mean, it looked like he was on the verge of his best start to date. And then in a span of 8 pitches, the game just kind of tumbled on him.
Yeah.
And that has been a theme for Spencer. He's been really good the first time through. He's been pretty good the second time through the order. But the third time has been very much an issue. His ERA was over 12, and that was before today. So it's probably 20.
Small sample size, but of course, it is very intuitive for people who don't know this. Just to say it out loud, it's the general consensus is that it's harder to pitch third time through the order because teams have seen you twice, especially
Yeah.
if you're a young guy who's not done this a lot. And the numbers are look, you can't expect it to be this extreme, but they're making him pay when he stays in the game.
And I really think with Schwellenbach, it is just a matter of him learning how to pitch at this high level. And just for a reminder, he only made two starts above high A ball before being called up. Two, Brad. He threw 13 innings with Mississippi before the Braves called him up to the major leagues.
And zero in Gwinnett, just as a reminder, zero in Gwinnett, zero.
Yes. And he was another guy who, in I believe 2021, he was a second round pick of the Braves, and he had Tommy John very early. So he didn't make his professional debut until 2023. So you're talking about a player who has such little experience pitching professionally. The stuff is really impressive. Every time Schwellenbach has gone out there, I say to myself, okay, this kid has the stuff to be an effective big league starter. He's still just learning how to attack and what to do when you get ahead 0-2 and how to nibble on the corners without getting beat and how to throw effective waste pitches and everything that you have to do to be a pitcher at the very highest level. I really am encouraged. And it's just a bummer that seemingly in every start, he has had one inning that has kind of skewed everything else. Because I mean, he was shoving the first three or four innings today, and he just made a couple of mistakes to really two of the good hitters in Pittsburgh's lineup. And before you knew it, a 1-0 lead was a 4-1 deficit.
Yeah, I am with you on that. I think as a podcast, we're a little bit higher on Swellenbach than most, and he's not perfect at this point, but there's a lot of polish there that I'm intrigued by, and I kind of believe in him. I think the Braves kind of do too, based on what they've said and sort of their actions in recent days. The offense was not very good again, which is probably more important in that particular loss than Schwellenbach was. Our guy Steven had this stat basically. Of course, they scored 5 runs in the third inning on Friday, as we sort of talked about a second ago. The rest of the last 4 games, they scored 5 runs total. So 10 runs in 4 games is not good anyway, but it's especially bad when 5 of those runs are 1 inning of those 4 games.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's not like the dark times are back from where it was like a 6 week power outage, but hopefully that's not going to be the case moving forward. But these 4 games were kind of reminiscent of that stretch.
It is tough for the Braves to score consistently when the bottom half of the lineup is effectively a zero.
Yeah, well, especially because you mentioned it earlier. We should just say this too. In addition to Azuna being cooled off, Matt Olson's in a slump right now too. I think kind of people were too late to realize that Olson had broken out of his early season slump and is actually pretty good for a long while. I think right now it's like kind of quiet how bad he's been for a few weeks or a couple weeks at
Yeah.
least. So if you just say Ozuna and Olson are both struggling at the same time, and then you get to what you just said, where the bottom of the order, name your 3 guys, but most of the time it is Arcia and 2 other guys who are not impressive, whether it's Wall or whether it's Williams. Duvall's been struggling like that. 3 out of those 4 or 5 guys is pretty dismal at the bottom of the order.
Yeah, I mean, it's brutal, Brad. These at bats are tough to watch. I mean, Orlando Arcia had a chance on Sunday to come through, runners on the corners with only 1 out, and struck out on the ball, nowhere even close to the plate. And it was like, oh my gosh, how much longer? Adam Duvall, a great human being by everyone's account, but he has been so bad this year, especially against right-handed pitching. No hate to Forrest Wall, but he's a 28-year-old minor league journeyman.
Yeah,
That is who he is.
and
Maybe he could be.
he's not known for his bat, even when he's like he actually has some major league skills, but his bat's not supposed to be one of them.
Yes, he is a specialty pinch runner and late inning defensive replacement, but he has never really hit at any point in the minors. He is up out of sheer necessity right now because of the Braves' injury situation. Hopefully, Ramon Laureano is back early this week. He's missed the last 3 or 4 games with some lower back issues. So let's hope he's back. I've been encouraged by Laureano. But again, Brad, I mean, you just see that Arcia, Duvall, Wall grouping at the bottom of the order, and it's like, oh my gosh, these at bats are not major league quality.
Yeah, Duvall had a couple moments this weekend that were relatively encouraging, and I hold out hope there. I know there were some of us that were sharing some Adam Duvall stats over the weekend, and his expected stats are way better than his actual stats this year, which I know that there's a portion of our audience that will definitely roll their eyes, and I totally get that. I think the underlying stuff is a little bit better than the actual numbers, but still, it's been rough. And we spent a lot of time, you and I, literally a week ago on the show, on the Sunday show about Arcia. So we won't do the entire thing again, but I pulled this stat. Um, it actually does not even include today's game where he had a rough one again. But in the previous 62 games, so it's about 10 weeks or so worth of data, he has been the worst qualified position player in all of Major League Baseball by Fangraphs WAR. The worst. And that includes defense. Yikes. I don't even know what to say about that. So that's not, and look,
Yeah.
it's not a huge sample size. That's almost a half a season. That's like 40% of a season, 35% of the season. Like it's not like it's a week. That's 10 weeks.
We talked about Orlando and the shortstop position for what, 25 minutes last weekend, Brad?
Yep.
It was a lengthy conversation. And if folks missed that, our general takeaway is that while Orlando plays a really solid defense, the bat is bad, and the Braves might just prefer to take the zero offensively and instead have his defense up the middle. Man, Brad, every time I watch, I think maybe they just throw Nacho Alvarez out there and see what he can do because it has been so bad. You just outlined probably a negative point 0.8 WAR over 62 games. I mean that is unplayable. And as you noted, that includes his defense. So there's only so much you can withstand from a player before you have to make a change of some kind. We also talked about Nacho and some of the limitations or hesitations that folks who are smarter than we are with the minor league system have shared. But man, I mean, we might get to a breaking point where it's like, what the hell? It can't be any worse.
Yeah.
Let's make a change for 3 weeks and see what happens. I don't know. I would be thrilled and extremely curious to know what goes on behind closed doors in the clubhouse.
Yeah, I still don't love that option, but if they did it, I wouldn't throw a fit. Does that make sense? Is that a reasonable framing? Like I
Oh
don't
yeah.
love it, but I have a hard time criticizing it because of just how bad RC has been. It gives us no pleasure. It's just that he's not hitting at all. By the way, over that sample size, it's a 29 WRC plus. League
Oof.
average is 100. So not what you want. Anyway,
And
we can leave it there.
we
But
are. Oh, I mean to cut you off,
no, you're
Brad.
good.
We are a month exactly from the trade deadline. So maybe some of the appeal of calling up Nacho Alvarez is you would get a couple of weeks to see what you maybe have with him before the trade deadline to decide what you're going to do at the position. We'll see what the Braves do, regardless of what they decide to ultimately do with shortstop. I want Nacho to continue playing every single day, whether it's in Gwinnett or it's in Atlanta. I don't want to bring him up for a platoon or some kind of weird situation where they aren't playing him at shortstop. I know a few folks that mentioned maybe he could play the outfield for a little while. I don't want to do that. I would be firmly against it, actually. But I think every single day, I think it becomes louder and louder that even if Orlando is really steady up the middle defensively, it might be time to make a change.
Yeah, we'll see. And I know one thing about Snit in particular. It's not his choice because he's not the general manager, but Snit is very patient with guys that he likes, and that includes Orlando. So we'll see if that factors in at all. But we are on the same page. It's been brutal for a while, and it's not changing. At least it hasn't yet. Quickly before we preview the upcoming week and get out of here, you teased it earlier, but AJ Minter seems to be coming back on Tuesday by all accounts. The Braves are off on Monday. He pitched today in Gwinnett, third inning, seemed to be just fine. And the Braves tipped their hand a little bit, it seems, by optioning Hernandez. Just to say this out loud, Hernandez has been really good. He has literally a 0 ERA this year. But it's the curse of options. Scott, I know we talked about this a lot in previous years, but when only one or two guys have options in your bullpen, they are the guys that inevitably get set down.
Yeah, it's a bummer for Daysbell, whose performance is no way indicative of him going back to the minors. It sounds to me like it was between Daysbell or Grant Holmes, who has been equally as good in that role. And I think one thing that might give Grant Holmes a little bit of an edge is that he's able to cover multiple innings, which is something that Daysbell probably can't do. But at the end of the day, it's great to have AJ back. It's great to have Daysbell waiting in Gwinnett because at some point the Braves are going to call upon him again. And I mean, you have to feel pretty good as we hit the midway point with where the bullpen is, assuming everybody can stay healthy.
Yeah, that's Mitchell's obviously someone you can't just hold off. If he's ready to go, he's ready to go. So that's a plus when he comes back, and presumably that'll be on Tuesday. Nothing official, we should note, but that's the assumption of I think everyone I talked to in the last few hours. Harris is getting closer. He's been hitting, he's been throwing, he's not been running yet though. He's been out for 16 days at this moment in time. Obviously, the Braves are incentivized to take their time there. I know it might not seem like it because they're in kind of dire need of Michael Harris on the field, but Alex has kind of alluded to this. Like they know what they have as a team, and they're not going to push guys, especially guys who are young and signed forever, like Michael Harris. They will be sure he's ready to go when he comes back. But obviously, it'd be nice to have him back.
It will be great to have him back, especially defensively in center field. Kelnick has been fine. I mean,
Yeah,
honestly, he is. I think Kelnick has exceeded my expectations. I know the first time he was in center field, I was like, oh man, that's asking a lot for a player who has basically never played it other than occasionally in Seattle. But Kelnick's been fine out there defensively. But you get Michael Harris back in maybe a few weeks. I'm guessing he's probably going to come back just after the All-Star break, if I had to guess. I don't have any sourcing on that, but just the timeline would make sense. And then once you get Michael back in center, you can shift Kelnick to left. Then you're really only looking for one outfielder. And I think right now we are really feeling the crunch, basically needing two outfielders every single night. So it'll give Alex some time to evaluate, and let's hope that they add an impact outfielder of some kind. It may not be a superstar, but somebody who does move the needle a little bit. Bonus points if it would be someone who gets on base at a higher clip. I think the Braves have plenty of slug, or at least they do when the ball isn't dying at the warning track every night. But some on base would be terrific to add to this lineup because there's just not a ton of that. There's not a ton of walks happening right now.
yes.
It would be nice to find that player, and who knows if that player is even going to exist come trade deadline time. But nonetheless, it will be great to have Michael Harris back in a couple of weeks. It was encouraging to hear that he's been hitting and throwing. And I would imagine maybe within the next week or so, he'll start doing some light jogging and running in the outfield.
Yeah, to your point about walks, while we're here, I looked this up while you were talking. This year, the Braves coming into today were 22nd in the league in walk rate.
Oof.
Last year they were like only middle of the pack, and a lot of that's probably just not having Ronnie who walks a lot, but still like not been a lot of patience at the plate. And look, Ozzy never walks, Harris never walks, so like they have some guys that just don't take walks, but still you want to be a little bit more patient than they've been so far this year. Last injury thing, Ian Anderson made a rehab start on Sunday in Augusta. Looked fine by all accounts. He's getting closer. I don't know how close. People always ask us. I don't know the answer there, nor do I know what they would do with Anderson when he is ready. Like, okay, Scott, let's just say this. Hypothetical, no prep from us. If Ian was ready to go in 5 days, would you rather have him pitch or Schwellenbach?
Schwellenbach.
Me too. Now,
Yeah.
obviously, that's a little bit of maybe recency bias, and we like Swanbach too. But I don't think Ian's going to be given a rotation spot just because he's ready to pitch. I don't think. Maybe he will. Maybe we'll be wrong about this, but I think it might take a little bit of a falter. Maybe they go to the 6-man rotation again. That also just happened very
Yeah.
recently, so that might happen again. But Ian obviously is a big name, but I think he's not quite the like, oh man, we're just counting the days down until he's ready to go. I'm not sure if that. I'm not sure it's that.
Yeah, I think looking at a timeline for Ian, today was his first real affiliate start. I know he pitched down in the FCL a couple of days ago, but a rehab start today with Augusta, which is A ball. I would assume it's at least another month of rehab for Ian Anderson before we even have a consideration for a rotation spot. Of course, you're just hoping that his health cooperates, the elbow doesn't start getting sore, no setbacks otherwise. But it is going to be interesting to see what the Braves do this summer. You potentially could get Anderson back. AJ Smith Shaver should be coming back at some point from the oblique injury. Schwellenbach has been good. Bryce Elder has been fine. I mean, he was not the reason the Braves lost a couple of days ago in St. Louis. It's because the offense can't score. And then, of course, if there's a trade deadline acquisition, then you're adding yet another arm to the rotation on top of your big four. So there's some depth here. I'm always knocking on wood anytime you talk about pitching depth because you
Yep.
blink and it goes goodbye very quickly. But as we get into early July, it is something I would imagine the front office is starting to think about a little bit.
For sure. And that's one of the pillars of our podcast dating back years. Like you never want to just look at the top five. It has your 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 guys matter. in over the course of a long season, and throw them all in there, and eventually you're going to need all of them. And this year the Braves found that out very early with the Strider injury, but cycling through guys will be happening all the way through the season, I would imagine, and that includes right now. Okay, before we get out of here, Scott, let's preview a little bit of the week ahead. We'll save more of our deep dive Phillies preview, but the Phillies come to town Friday, Saturday, Sunday in a big time showdown before the break, and everyone's focused on that, and as they should. Before that, though, they have an off day on Monday, and as you counted up, it is their final day off until the All-Star break. So it's going to be a lot of baseball. Not that there wasn't a lot of baseball this week because there was that flurry of 3 games in like 27 hours or something like that. But they get a day off on Monday, and then it's full steam ahead to the break.
Yes, a lot of baseball ahead. It's a 9-game, 10-day homestand, and the Braves are 2-1 so far. I know everybody wanted to win on Sunday and get the sweep, but you'll take the series win. The Giants are okay. They actually beat the Dodgers this weekend in a series. They're sub 500. They have a negative run differential. Offensively, the Giants are pretty good, actually. I believe they're top 12 in WRC plus, but the pitching has been pretty bad. They went out and signed Blake Snell very late, and he has been a disaster. And now he's hurt. In the rotation, they only have really one good starter, who's Logan Webb, who is going to pitch one of the games. But they're not a bad team. If you told me in 2 months that the Giants were going to be very much in the hunt for a wild card spot, it wouldn't be a surprise. They're pretty close right now, but they are also not a great team, and frankly, a team that the Braves should win 2 out of 3 against at home.
Yeah, I would say that's the general projection I would give before the series, especially because the Braves have scheduled right now anyway, as of Sunday. It's Lopez on Tuesday, Sale on Wednesday, and Morton on Thursday. If that happens, the Braves have the pitching advantage in 2 of the 3 games. The third one is Morton, who's obviously pretty solid, but that's against Webb, so that's their best pitcher. But still, that's a pretty good lineup for the Braves. If you look ahead, if that is the case, that means that you're going to see Schwellenbach against the Phillies. Don't love that necessarily, but even if we like him, that might be a little bit of a challenge. But alas, that's a decent spot this week, and of course the day off on Monday to kind of reset things after kind of a frustrating last 3 or 4 days. Even though they went 2-2 in the last 4 days, it felt worse than that. I don't know about you. It kind of felt worse than that just because the offense was not much fun to watch.
No, for a team that is 10 games above 500, it does not feel that way. I know we talked about the midway point earlier in the pod. If you would have asked me just blindly, if I had no idea what the Braves record was, but I could watch the games and just not have any recollection of wins and losses, I would have told you they're closer to 500 just with some of the offensive frustrations. Maybe that's just me. But here we are, Brad, right? We're at the midway point, 10 games above 500, 8 back of the division. You have a winnable series against the Giants, and then a very important 3 games at home against the Phillies. The Phillies are without both Bryce Harper and Kyle Schwarber. Both of them are on the injured list. It feels like about as important of a series as you can play in early July. Not that we are going to make any grand conclusions from 3 games at this point in the year, but if the Braves are going to make up ground in the East, they have a really good opportunity ahead of them next weekend.
Yeah, it's all fair. I think that we did our job on this podcast and being true to our brand about trying to just say, look, the Braves have been pretty good this year, even though it doesn't feel like it. But you're right that it doesn't feel like it. And I know what the reaction will be. And you and I are going to, we're planning to talk later on this week before the Phillies series. I know what the reaction will be if they don't win at least 2 of those 3 games. And we'll see. You know what I mean? Like, just because, and look, that's not unreasonable because of the deficit they have right now. Like, if they were tied or if the Braves were down by 2 games, you and I would say and 100% mean that nothing, not that it wouldn't matter, but like no result would like change the perception of the race. If you go into the weekend down by 8 and you lose the series at home to the Phillies, it's going to not feel great.
Yeah. Then you're trying to make up a 9 or 10 game deficit over 3 months effectively. And it's not impossible. We saw the Braves do it 2 years ago against the Mets. But I also think this Phillies team is better than that Mets team. It's more sustainable. They have a crazy run differential. And Philadelphia's also had some injuries, and they just keep on banging that drum. So I agree with everything you said. It is, of course, it's not like they have 3 must-win games next weekend or anything like that. but 3 important games, and hopefully without Philadelphia being at 100%, the Braves can win 2 of those and just kind of keep chipping away at the division deficit.
That's the plan, or was the hope if you are someone who supports the Atlanta Braves. But yeah, that's it for us on today's podcast, I think, Scott. And that's it for the month of June on this podcast. Thanks for listening, everybody. We definitely appreciate it. Scott, anything to plug as we head into the second half of the season and also a new month of July?
Nothing to plug. Always nice to get one of these in with you, Brad. I hope everybody out there is doing well. A happy early 4th of July. Be a nice holiday week. And yeah, let's hope the Braves, I know they had a frustrating game on Sunday, but let's hope they keep it rolling, keep winning series. And man, if they can just score some damn runs, Brad, I think it would do everybody a world of good, everybody's mental health, a world of good if the Braves can score some runs and be a little more consistent on offense. We'll be sure to be back here soon on the show. Please, if you don't already, please subscribe, download, tell a friend, and we'll do one of these again soon.
Scott did my job for me, telling you to subscribe to the podcast. One more plug for the Brandon Gaudin interview. Listen to that. If you've already missed that, we definitely encourage you to catch up on that one. And we'll have much more coming up this week from myself, from Scott, from Steven, from Sean. Stay tuned, and we'll see you all next time.